like to now introduce Force Family Office's CEO, Steven Saltzstein. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Callie, and thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. We greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day to be with us. Just quickly on Force Family Office, we are the largest network of investment-seeking family offices in the U.S. We bring families together to share intellectual capital, best practices, we educate them, we give them a platform for their charities and philanthropies. But ultimately what we do is we bring family offices together in the context of co-investing, and then we bring them great investment opportunities, just like Epibone. So with that said, it is my great pleasure to have the honor of speaking with Dr. Nina Tandon, who's CEO and co-founder of Epibone, and Dr. Robert Langer, who is arguably one of the greatest scientists of our generation. A little bit about Nina. Nina Tandon is the CEO and co-founder of Epibone, the world's first company growing living human bone for skeletal reconstruction. She is the co-author of Supercells, Building with Biology, a book that explores the new frontier of biotech. Nina has also been awarded Crain's New York 40 Under 40, Ernst & Young Winning Women, and Goldman Sachs' 100 Most Intriguing Entrepreneurs. She has a bachelor's in electrical engineering from Cooper Union, a master's in bioelectrical engineering from MIT, a PhD in biomedical engineering, as well as an MBA from Columbia University. Her PhD research focuses on studying electrical signaling in the context of tissue engineering and has worked with cardiac, skin, bone, and neural tissue. Dr. Langer is the youngest person in history at 43 to be elected to all three American Science Academies, the National Academy of Sciences, the National Academy of Engineering, and the National Academy of Medicine. He was also elected as a charter member of the National Academy of Inventors and was elected as the International Fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering. Dr. Langer has received over 220 major awards. He's one of 5 living individuals to have received both the United States Medal of Science in 2006 and the United States Medal of Technology and Innovation in 2011. He also received the 2002 Charles Stark Draper Prize, considered the equivalent of the Nobel Prize for Engineers, the 2008 Millennial Prize, the world's largest technology prize, and the 2014 Kyoto Prize. He is also the only engineer to receive the Gardner Foundation International Award. 82 recipients of this award have subsequently received Nobel Prizes. Among numerous other awards, Dr. Langer has received the John Fritz Award, given previously to inventors such as Thomas Edison and Orville Wright, and an introduction into the Inventors Hall of Fame in 2006, and the Max Planck Research Award in 2008. Now, very importantly, he has founded numerous biotech companies, certainly including Moderna. And Dr. Langer, I want to thank you on behalf of the world for founding Moderna, but he's also founded other companies such as Accusphere, Air, Arsenal, Arisa, Bind, Terveda, Santra, Enzitech, Ticium, Living Proof, Microchip Biotech, etc., and as well as one of the founders and is on the board of Epibone. So with that said, Nina, would you mind tell us a little bit about Epibone?
First of all, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much to Bob for participating in this panel. Epibone is really a marriage of 2 technologies that have been just so important to the past 30 years. Firstly, digital fabrication, where we can take bits that describe shapes and turn them into shapes in the real world. So 3D printing has been a big force, and combining that with stem cell engineering. So we at Epibone, what we do is we say, look, cells grew our bodies in the first place and repair our bodies every day. How can we combine those with digital fabrication so that we can make living, anatomically precise bone, cartilage, combinations of bone and cartilage that can help our bodies repair when our own bodies, aren't up to the challenge because the injuries are just too big. So it's really just taking what nature does already, which is to support our living systems and the bodies that we live in, and combining that with technology so that we don't need to repair all those parts of our bodies that by the time we go through this lifetime, we're bound to need to replace with metal and plastic, but replacing them instead with parts of our body that we grow ourselves with our own cells. So it's been a wonderful journey. We started the company in 2014. Spun out of Columbia University. And I'm proud to say that we're now on the doorstep of our first in-human clinical trial. We just got approved last week at Cleveland Clinic to start our first in-human clinical trial.
Congratulations. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Hey, do us a favor. Tell us, what was it like to work in the Langer lab? What was your research there?
Oh, well, first of all, I've never worked in a lab before where we had a softball team that could compete with departments at MIT. So our softball team was a lot of fun. We competed against the mathematics department, did quite well. And I've also never worked in a lab where we were large enough to have a seminar series in which postdocs from the lab would present their work, and grad students always love free food. So it was a great opportunity for us to get together over dinner and hear about cutting edge research coming out of the lab. It was a pretty dynamic time. I was there from 2004 to 6. And it was a really exciting time for stem cells, exciting time for cancer research. And not surprisingly, it was a very dynamic time to be a starting graduate student. It was sort of like a kid in a candy store.
Right. Dr. Langer, can you just elaborate on how collaborative and entrepreneurial your lab is? And I mean, do you think that's the key to one of your successes?
Well, I think, well, first, our lab is very interdisciplinary. I think that's one of the unique features. There's a term we often use called convergence. If you go to most universities, even today, but certainly when I started a number of years ago, like there's a building for like the English, department. There's a building for the math department, a building for the chemistry department. What I've been fortunate about, first, when I was a postdoc, I was the only engineer in Boston Children's Hospital. And today, our lab has 10, 12 different disciplines in it. We have MD, medical doctors with different backgrounds. We have biochemists, geneticists, physicists, mechanical engineers, pharmacy people, almost everything. And I think that's, from a science standpoint, part of what enables us to do things, because we're able to take ideas that I or some of the people in the lab might come up with and take them all the way from start to, really moving them into animals, sometimes even people trials. So that's sort of how we get started. We've had unusual ideas, and we publish them in journals like Science and Nature, where many of the major discoveries, like the structure of DNA and CRISPR, have been published. We average, I think, about 18 papers in those journals every year. But I've had the additional desire to not just do basic research, but to take the ideas that we have and get them out to the world, because publications, of course, are nice. But what's the most important thing is to be able to help people. And so we've patented these things. We've got something like over 1,400 issued and pending patents. And we've used those to create companies, to license it to companies. And I think that's been the other key thing that differentiates us. And those companies, like you mentioned, Moderna, I think there's 8 companies that we've started that have valuations over $1 billion. And the net market capitalization of all of the companies that we've started is something like about $120 billion. So, and part of the key to that has been students like Nina, that we've had people like, say, Armin Shari, who was a graduate student of mine and made a discovery on how to squeeze things into cells, which could totally change their character and lead to new kinds of cancer treatments. And he spent years working in the lab, and then he I asked him one day when he was a postdoc, what was his dream? He said, well, my dream is to start this company and to run it. And now that's a public company. He's the CEO. We've done that over and over again. And it's really been having these unbelievable students and postdocs like Armin and Nina and others who, it made all the difference. I try to help a little, but we've got great people, and that's key.
One of the things I read is that you've either helped or cured over 2 billion people, for you and the products that have come out of your lab. And that's incredible. So Nina, can you talk a little bit about what were you going to say? Sorry. I
said that's the goal, is as I mentioned, that's why we do it, because the discoveries only go so far, but the companies and the things that the papers, it's trying to really help people.
You know, I read in your background, and I think this is proof of what you're saying, is that you started your career helping kids that were less fortunate understand science and creating science curriculums. And you know, I just think you absolutely should be commended for that. That, you know, that was kind of the first place you went once you yeah, once you graduated.
No, that was very, very useful to me, and I hope to the students. You know, it's been great to, you know, to see, you know, these were kids that had, you know, often had different kinds of problems and had dropped out of school. And you know, Cambridge at that time had the highest high school dropout rate of any place in the United States, which is kind of shocking given that Harvard and MIT are there. But it had a lot of slums, and you know, so it was a privilege to try to hopefully turn a lot of the kids' lives around. And so I think it was a great experience, and you know, did a lot of good.
You know, it seems to me that in many ways you were kind of a 15-year overnight success, meaning the first kind of 15 years you had a lot of struggle, right? I mean, you even, you know, you struggled with the first patent, took 5 years to get the first patent. I think it took from 1981 to 1993 to get the NIH grant for the polymer in relation to cancer. And I'm just wondering, you know, I look at Nina, and she is one of the most positive people I've ever met. And I feel like that permeates throughout her organization. And, you know, I'm just wondering, you know, how important that is as a scientist and as a successful entrepreneur in being able to endure and just, you know, keep your eyes and focus on the end goal and the success.
Well, I think it's one of the most, if not the most important thing. I mean, you have to believe. You know, there's a say. You know, I think, and Nina is great. I mean, she's always been that way. As you know, I remember her close to 20 years ago, and she, I mean, not only is incredibly smart, but she, you know, she's gonna never give up. And that kind of attitude, that kind of persistence, that kind of perseverance, that makes a huge difference. I mean, medical technology is one of these things that's a very high risk, very high reward area. And and it's easy to fail. But, you know, at the end of the day, I've often said, sometimes people ask me, you know, about success. I said, well, look, you know, it's easy, you know, to deal with success. Anybody can do that. But the fact is, in research, you're going to deal with failure a lot more than you deal with success. So the people that are most successful are the ones that know how to deal with failure as well. And they keep their head up, and they keep trying, and they keep being innovative, and they figure out if there's something wrong, they're going to solve it. And, you know, Nina has, I mean, all her life, that's what she's done.
Mm.
Solve things.
That's
Thanks. It helps to enjoy the work.
Well, absolutely. But and also the reward is you know, the reward is that you can do things with Epibone, that if people have orthopedic problems, you know, need new bone, need new cartilage, that someday they'll be able to have it, whereas they never could before.
Yeah, I mean, that really is the world that I want to live in, one where we don't have to replace parts of our body with metal and plastic. And I definitely have drunk the Kool-Aid in terms of believing in the power of cells to heal. So it's, you know, it's a real joy to make this my life's work, to try and apply these technologies towards helping people with skeletal issues. The thing about skeletal issues is that they often don't knock us out. You know, we live with them for a long time, and they really decrease our quality of life for a long time. And so we can, you know, I really believe that we can dramatically change people's lives for the better if we can help decrease their pain and help them live better in the bodies they were born with.
That's great. Nina, can you talk about your journey as a founder? At what point did you think about starting the company, and what were some of the things that shaped your conviction around the idea and the opportunity for the company?
Yeah, well, I came into Bob's lab as an electrical engineer, so it was a very collaborative environment, like you mentioned, and I was really interested in understanding how electrical signals were important in wound healing, in cardiac development. Cardiac disease kills more people than all cancer combined, and as the world globalizes and ages, this number is really poised to grow. And I was working with my mentor, Gordana Vonyak-Novakovic, who later moved to Columbia, and that's how I went. That's how I got to Columbia. I went with her, and it was around the time in the mid-aughts when stem cells were becoming very hotly debated in the press, and it became very clear that what I was looking at under my microscope, doing the experiments daily and nightly, oftentimes. Sometimes the microscopes were easiest to reserve if you got there after midnight. But it was one of those things where you realized that there was an outside world of politics, of healthcare entrepreneurship, of big business, patents, IP, the whole, you name it, that were just as important to whether or not those cells under the microscope could ever help people than the cells themselves. And so, nowhere better than in Bob's lab was it evident that entrepreneurship could be an avenue to help translate, we use that word translate, the technology towards the clinic. And so I think the real aha moment came in Gordana's lab when we said, there's always an important paper that goes along with this. And it actually wasn't my research, it was my co-founder's research, where they had published in a high impact journal, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, work about growing bone with three-dimensional anatomical precision. And not only was it written about and in this high impact peer-reviewed journal, but it was also picked up by the New York Times. I think the tagline was something like "replacement bones grown to order" or something like this. And so, I think typical for science, there's less of an aha moment that's overnight and more of a 15-year type of aha. I think in this case, we really had that moment where we realized that this work that had been going on in the lab for 20 plus years, it was time to start moving it towards patients. And in the meantime, I graduated from my PhD, worked at McKinsey for a couple of years as a pharma and med device consultant, and sort of seen more about that wider world of healthcare. It really became the moment of, let's write a business plan. Let's make this a company. It was just clear that the academic lab was no longer the right home for it, that if we were really going to start to translate it towards the patients, that it was time to start a company. And luckily we had lots of peers that we could ask for advice, other peers, other entrepreneurs that had come out of Bob's lab to help us understand that it was the right time, and to help us also get connected with the right IP lawyers, get connected with the right folks who could help fund that first friends and family round. So it was really, I'd say, a very fruitful time, a very creative time starting the company.
That's great. Bob, can you talk about which projects belong in academia and which ones belong in a company? I've heard you speak about every startup needs to have 5 things. Is it a platform technology? Is there a good paper behind it? Are there really powerful patents behind the technology? Has it advanced in the clinic, good animal data, et cetera? And, is there a champion behind it, the champion's effect?
Well, you gave a great analysis of when I think something's ready to start a company. But to more broadly answer the question, what I think about as academia is, we don't have a timeline on getting something out. It's really basic research, and it's purely research. It's trying to make a discovery or trying to invent a technology. You're not sure how long it takes, but you feel that if you can do that, it has the potential to change the world, or do something very important. And so when you're at a later stage, and you said it well, I think I've said that to Harvard Business Review, the 5 things, when you've really gotten this proof of principle, maybe even in an animal study, when you do have a scientific paper that shows that, when you have a good, powerful patent or patents behind it, and then that some of the students who have worked on this, want to make it happen, then I think you could be ready for starting a company. The company, I think, will do much more what I'll call development than just research. Company, is going to have a timeline for moving things out. And one of a couple of things that the company's going to do that you don't generally do in academia are manufacturing and clinical trials. So I think there's some major distinctions, but to me it's almost like, I don't want to say seamless, but it's great when you can start the research in the university and make some important discoveries, get some great papers and patents, but then, get it out to the world and through the company.
Yeah.
Nina, let's go through Bob's checklist in
Okay.
regards to EpiBone. So let's talk about EpiBone in regards to a platform technology.
Right. So, our platform is really based on the cell fates for mesenchymal stem cells, adult mesenchymal stem cells. So these are the adult stem cells that are located in our adipose tissue, located in our bone marrow, and they can very readily grow bone, cartilage, ligaments, tendons, and adipose tissue, not surprisingly, fat tissue. So we chose these stem cell sources because they're very much devoid of any of the controversy associated with embryonic stem cells. And they also don't have as much risk of forming teratomas or any sort of cancer or going off script, let's say, in the body. So but it's a platform. We can grow tons of different types of tissues. So, for us, it was really important to be able to then choose out of this large universe of possibilities of what we could grow, what would be the right first application, what would be the right second application, and so on. So for us, we as our first application, we chose an indication with high unmet need, where we could really showcase our technology, where shape really matters. And so we chose bones in the head and face because this really fits the bill. It's a niche application. About 75,000 patients per year in the US suffer from complex craniofacial reconstruction needs. And shape really matters. Everybody's face is different. But the technology that underlies that first clinical trial that we're going forward with for bones in the face also serves as a kind of cornerstone from a regulatory, IP, and business perspective. So just to give an example, our second product actually takes the same bone scaffold biomaterial that we use for growing bone and engineers a layer of cartilage on top of it. So then all of a sudden now we have, as a platform, we're able to reference those regulatory documents with the FDA. We're able to build much more efficiencies in terms of our manufacturing, and also target a much higher unmet need in terms of patient numbers. So about 3 times as many patients for that. And then for our third product, which is an injectable cartilage, again, another 3 times as many patients. So with our platform alone, with the applications we're currently going after, we're looking at, about 1.5 million patients per year who could really benefit from these technologies. And this is just cherry picking those first 3 applications of our platform. In the medium and long term, we'd really like to be able to expand even further.
That's great. What about back to one of the building blocks of a good early stage company, just like the papers behind.
Papers. Yeah, I mean, I think scientific founders, we're really comfortable in writing, grant applications, writing scientific papers, and we were very blessed that the work that we were doing was had sort of had just caught on, I would say, in terms of just creating enough of a splash with our approach. As Bob mentioned, it was a really interdisciplinary lab. So the idea of combining digital fabrication with stem cells was something that not everybody was capable to do, dots that not everybody was able to connect. And so we had several papers come out in PNAS, Science, and then later Science Translational Medicine in terms of the animal work that really served not only to as a kind of de-risking when folks would do diligence on us. There's nothing better than seeing a high impact journal, peer-reviewed journal, but also helped us from the regulatory perspective, because the FDA is populated by pretty serious scientists themselves, and being able to see the kind of rigor that the work had gone through in terms of peer review, I think also really helped us there as well.
Bob, what's your philosophy around patenting, and what is the right time, and how broad do you want to go with patent portfolios?
Well, I want to go really broad, and the right time to me is when you've done, like, pretty much when we've written maybe draft 3 or 4 of a paper, in the sense that I don't think it has to be as perfect as a finalized scientific paper, but it needs to have the concept. It needs to be reduced to practice. It may not have done every single control experiment, but so I think that the right time is then, because what that enables you to do is have the broadest possible patent. That's something that we've always done in every company I've been involved with. We've put a real premium on great intellectual property. But if you patent too early, people might argue there's legal terms like enablement and things like that, and people might argue that you haven't done that. So we want to make them as we want to make them as powerful as possible. But also, since we're an academic group, our goal is to put it out to the world so people can use it in every way. And it's also important for the students who work on it. But so we publish everything and we patent everything, and and we try to, like I say, publish in the best places and patent as broadly as possible. I should point out that from an investment standpoint, and when you're in the medical area, having really broad patents is obviously key. When I'm asked, when I'm on the, like when people ask me to evaluate companies, I always look at their intellectual property. To me, that especially in the medical area, it's just really, really important.
Yeah.
Nina, can you talk about Epibone's patent portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, so we spun out of the academic institution. We spun out of Columbia. Columbia is pretty sophisticated in terms of their tech transfer office, and so there were 3 pieces of IP that really were foundational for us. Very broad patents covering the methods and apparatus for growing bone and cartilage. So this was actually a gating factor for us to be able to take in our first money. In fact, there were several sophisticated family offices that asked us at the time, have you executed your license agreement yet? And luckily, with their help, we were able to execute that when we first started the company. So those 3 pieces of IP were very important to us. But academic institutions have a little bit of a different mentality when it comes to IP than entrepreneurial companies like Epibone. And so while we had the coverage for method and apparatus for growing the tissues, it was very important for us to build on that as an independent company by covering technologies that allowed us to deliver that technology to patients, to transport it to hospitals, and to scale the production. So our IP portfolio, I'm really proud to say, is, we have 8 pieces of IP now compared to the 3 that we first licensed from Columbia. So we very much built on it ourselves as we think about translating this now towards the clinic and towards patients eventually.
Great. Dr. Langer, can you talk about when you realized it might be better to license or work with early stage companies as opposed to large pharma? I know you had an experience early on with Eli Lilly, and then there was another smaller company that also wanted to license your technology. And I think you just came to the realization that, the smaller companies are solely focused on the success of these licenses.
Yeah, well, that was back in 1983 to 1986. What you said is exactly right. We had created the first ways of doing controlled release. That's long-term release from materials, and and nobody seemed to care about it for 10 years. And finally, International Minerals and Chemicals, at the time, they were actually a multi-billion-dollar company too. They wanted to use it for animal health, and they gave me consulting fee, and they gave our lab a really big grant, and I was very excited about that. And then they were going to work on it, which I was even more excited about that, to create products. And then the next year, Eli Lilly did the same thing for human health. They gave us a big grant, and I ended up getting a much better car because of the consulting fee. And they were going to work on it too. But what would happen is that these companies, they put different scientists on it, but if it didn't work right the first few times, they kind of gave up. So that made quite an impression on me. And Alex Klebanoff, one of my good friends, about a year later said to me, Bob, he said, we should start our own company. And we did. And that was a little company called Enzitech, which merged to form Alkermes, which is now about a $4 billion company and has many products based on these kinds of technologies. And now, of course, many other products are based on it too. But it's so I think that experience really showed me that companies with very few people, surprisingly, will just have more passion, keep pushing harder, will walk through walls far more than companies with tens of thousands.
Switching gears a bit, Nina, can you talk about Epibone's pipeline? You mentioned it a little before. Obviously, you're not just focused on bone, but also cartilage and other things. So first of all, congratulations on getting into the phase 1. But can you lay that out in regards to the rest of the pipeline?
Sure. So our first product, which we call EBCMF, is what's entering the clinic now. EBCMF means Epibone Craniomaxillofacial. So it's a personalized, autologous, engineered living bone. Autologous meaning your own cells become your own bone. And it's intended for complex craniofacial reconstruction, which, as I mentioned, is about 75,000 patients per year. And we target a price point for that market of about $30,000 per implant. Now we build on that with our second product, which is called EBOC, which is Epibone Osteochondral. So this is actually a 2-tissue graft, which is really exciting because one tissue is one thing, but growing 2 tissues is another. And we engineer cartilage on top of that same piece of bone. And this is suitable for high-grade cartilage lesions that involve the subchondral bone. We're taking an allogenic approach, which means we're taking donor stem cells for this. So it's a much more scalable approach that is possible because of the degree of immune privilege that cartilage enjoys in the body. And this one has an unmet need of about 200,000 patients per year. So already that's about a $10 billion market. And for our third product, we're taking cartilage alone and crafting it into an injectable delivery system so that we can treat with minimally invasive procedures, lower grades, so that's grades 1 through 3, cartilage lesions. But we're using the same stem cell source as we use for the osteochondral product, but this one's suitable for up to about 1 million patients per year in the US alone. So those are just our first 3. We're laser focused on them, but we're going to be very excited now as we continue to de-risk our current pipeline in the coming years to start applying some of our learnings towards a broader one.
Dr. Langer, can you talk about getting products into the clinic and translating them to focus on human trials? What are some of the fundamental things that need to happen in order to turn the corner with some of these companies?
Well, to get something into clinical trials, I mean, there are probably 3 things that are really important. One is really proving something safe. I mean, that's obviously key in medicine, right? First, do no harm. And so you want to try to do that in different animal models, ideally 2 or 3 animal models. Secondly, you want to show that it's effective or has the potential to be effective. And you might do that as well. And third, you at least have to have some early stage manufacturing where you can make these things and show that you have good quality controls and that it'll be acceptable to the Food and Drug Administration. So I think those are the 3 things to get into clinical trials. Of course, the clinical trials, there's multiple stages of clinical trials, phase 1, 2, 3, and sometimes 4. But the corner often is what you just said, which is filing what's called an IND, an investigational new drug, or an IDE. So I think that's kind of how I'd look at it.
Can you talk about your view on scalability of manufacturing? I mean, Moderna's ramp up has gotten a lot of press. What makes biomanufacturing and distribution difficult?
Well, I think it depends on exactly what you're doing. I mean, we at Moderna, we hired the guy who was in charge of a lot of it for Novartis, Juan Andres. He's absolutely amazing. I mean, he's done just a spectacular job. And but really, you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. Different kinds of things require different types of manufacturing. I mean, in the case of Moderna, what we did is we had to make the messenger RNA, and then we had to put it into certain types of nanoparticles, which uses a procedure actually, which we did a lot of work on in our MIT lab called microfluidics. And then that has to be sort of scaled up. And that's actually also what Pfizer uses too. This is where publications are important because, in the end, you want everybody to be able to do it, but you want some protection. So at any rate, now Moderna, of course, is not asserting any patents in the COVID situation because you want things to, be helping people all over the world. But at any rate, it's so what I'm trying to say is that's one kind of thing. Obviously, if you're doing cells, that's a different kind of thing. If you're doing materials, that's a different type of thing. But basically, you have to have, really show that you have the same thing every time. You have to have ways to judge. This is called quality control, that you have the same features so that you'll know if it's successful once, it'll be successful again.
Nina, can you talk about Epibone's manufacturing and transportation strategy?
One of the things that is that I really do think sets us apart from other early stage companies was setting up our own state-of-the-art GMP manufacturing clean room. We were definitely going through the exercise of, a lot of early stage companies in the small molecule space can completely outsource their manufacturing. But when cells are not only the active ingredient in your therapy, it's a little bit more difficult. There's a lot of, IP is just one part of our, I would say patents are just one part of our IP strategy. We also have a significant amount of trade secrets in terms of our cell culture media composition, as well as know-how that comes into play. And I think when it came time to figure out our manufacturing for our clinical trial, we knew we needed to hire people. So we set up a quality team. There's lots of good talent in the tri-state area of New York. Lots of people work in these fields out in New Jersey, and we recruited some of them to work with us. But when it came time to design our clean room, it was also really interesting for me and my co-founder to realize, well, this is hard, but it's not that hard. I mean, we started digging into the weeds of, ISO 5, ISO 8, pressurized rooms, and we ended up building our own clean room using modular clean room components and hiring folks from quality. They'd come from, big pharma, and then asking them to help create from the ground up a quality program for us. So if anyone's interested in taking a tour of our clean room, we have an 8-minute video that we're happy to share with anyone who's willing to sign a visitor NDA, because it's something we're really proud of, but quite proprietary. And I think it's something that I'm very glad our engineering backgrounds really sort of reduce the fear factor for us in terms of, rolling up our sleeves and building it ourselves.
How did you come to the decision to locate the company in Brooklyn? I'm willing to bet that you are the only biotech of your stature with these incredible investors that is located in Brooklyn.
Well, I blame Gordana for that. So she's our academic founder in many ways. And when she left Bob's lab in 2004, she left to go to Columbia because she'd sent the first bioreactor up to space. She's a prolific inventor in her own right. And it was just a great opportunity for her to really expand her wings. But what this meant was that we were no longer in Cambridge, which is a pretty well-known biotech hub, and we found ourselves in Harlem. So actually, when we first spun out the company, we moved into a place called Sweets Laboratories, which was a former candy factory in Harlem that had been converted into a biotech lab. And then when we outgrew that space, we moved to some space rented out by SUNY Downstate for companies like ours. We now have about one quarter of the building. So when it comes time for us to expand again, I'm hoping we can stay close by, but it might be more difficult for us to stay where we are. So here we are in Brooklyn making artisanal bones.
Bob, I don't know if you've seen it, but one of the things I find extraordinary about Epibone is if you watch their introductory video, because when you watch that introductory video, the people who are doing the presentation are the office manager, the lab technician. I mean, it's everyone who's kind of in between the PhDs and the C-suite folks. And I'm just wondering, how important is culture to success for startups in your mind? And how do you, reflect that philosophy in your own lab?
Yeah, well, I have seen it. I've actually been to Epibone, and I think culture is hugely important, and also treating people well is really important. Treating them well at every level. I just feel first it's the right thing to do. Everybody's important, but culture is key. I mean, my thought, I know when I was starting out, different professors would tell me, or different people would tell me, well, why isn't that person working hard? We need to order them to work hard. And I've never felt that was a very good strategy. I always felt that what you want people to do is work hard, not because they have to, but because they want to. but because they believe that if they're doing something, it'll change the world and make it a better place. And, I think that that kind of attitude where people believe in what they're doing. I also think it's important that they have fun, that they're happy, and I think that those things, which I definitely it happens in our lab, definitely happens in Epibone and other companies I've been involved with. I think that that's critical. Both the fact that you're doing something really important and that you love doing it, and that you treat people well. All those things are critical. And when you have that, I think you have very happy people, very driven people, and they'll do things that will really surprise you and change everything.
Hmm.
That's great. There's a lot of talk out there about the best CEOs say no. And, I'm a CEO that says yes. And I think the power of yes and empowering people is what, makes our company successful. I'm curious for the both of you, because, Steve Jobs was always so well known for saying no to every idea that came across his desk. I'm just curious, what's your management philosophy and style from that regard?
Do you want to go, Nina, or would you like me to go?
I'll let you go first. I want to hear your answer.
Yeah. Well, I think that you really want to say both, but you want to use your judgment. First of all, the way I do it myself is I use, and I learned this from my advisor, what I'd call positive reinforcement. I never want people to feel discouraged or feel that they shouldn't come up with a next idea. I think that's really important. That being said, if the idea is not a good idea or it's going to take a really long time, you want to ask questions. You want to try to let them realize for themselves, what to do, and how to think about it next time. I mean, I still, like I say, feel my number one job as a professor and teacher, and so I want people to grow. I want people to learn. I want I want all the companies to be successful, and I want my students to be successful. But I feel like you can say both, depending on what they come up with. And and for me, like when somebody actually asked me, for all the things, the many products and billions of lives that the things we've done have helped, I'm just most proud of my students, because I feel like, they're taking what we've done and magnifying it far, far more than I as one person ever could.
Yeah, well said. One of my greatest joys is working with people smarter than I am, my goal is to always be surrounded, but to be the dumbest person in the room at all times, which means, and I'm not a genius. I'm smart enough. So it means that when you work with smart people, they have great ideas. And I think the best way to evaluate those ideas is to ask good questions. So and every time we look back in a given year, it looks like the questions that are on our horizon are very different than the ones were on our horizon last year. So being smart is not enough. Being a quick study is not enough. I think it's also really important to develop your sense of discernment and your love of learning. And one of the ways that we at Epibone really try and foster that is by making sure that everyone at the company has proper coaching. I think this is something that I took away from my academic kind of mindset, which is that you always want, you're always constantly training for a new job, because, hey, guess what? We're doing clinical trial manufacturing now. A year ago, we were applying to the FDA to do
Right.
so. So if you're in the Olympics of running a startup, to do so without a coach, I think is not a great idea. So, mentorship is one thing. I like to have an open door policy with everyone at the company. And we do really have a very good family atmosphere. And family businesses tend to outperform the market, consistently, generationally. But at the
Family
same
offices will be very happy to hear you say that. So.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think really sets us apart, is that we have, I've been working with Gordana for close to 20 years. That's when I started in Bob's lab. My co-founder and I have been working together since 2006. My best friend from high school works in the company. We've known each other for close to 30 years. It's long-term relationships are something that you can only maintain in such a fast-paced environment if you pay a lot of attention to how well you cultivate those. It doesn't come for free, but I think it does speak to the kind of commitment that we have to our future patients. And so, employing leadership coaching for everyone at the company helps us keep our tools fresh for the fresh set of challenges that are absolutely going to come down the pike, without question. If we're doing our jobs right, we're going to have a completely different set of challenges in 6 months than we do right now. So I think that is one thing that sets us apart, is just kind of knowing that change is part of the game, and hiring people that have good love of learning, respect for each other, and mission. And once you select for those things, then you find lots of diversity across all the other axes. We're really very much a monoculture when it comes to devotion towards our future patients whom we haven't even met yet. But on all other scales, whether it's our educational background, where we come from in the world, what gender, or what have you, on those markers, we're very diverse. But in terms of commitment to the patients and love of learning and respect for each other, I think we have a lot in common. We're very much a monoculture in that respect.
One of the opportunities you're going to have in the future is a decision on whether to partner, or whether to go it alone, whether to sell off international rights, or whether to kind of take it all the way to the end yourselves. So what's your philosophy there?
Well, I'm so glad we have wonderful people on our board that have done this many times, people like Bob. So, I know when to call and, to make an SOS call and bring in the big guns. But I think the philosophy that I've really learned from our mentors is that the best way to get great partners and eventually secure an exit, whether that's via IPO or via strategic partnership, is to stay laser focused on building a great company. And that's really what creates that optionality. But there are good moments for partnerships, especially when you think about the vaccine with COVID. There were certainly small companies that had the technology but didn't necessarily have the technology to scale. So there's a natural partnership, especially in our field, that can emerge when you start to get into the later stages of clinical trials. So we've definitely made friends across the biopharma and med device spaces. We are definitely always in conversations. I can't really speak to the particulars necessarily, but I promise you it's definitely an active area for us. But whether or not to pull the trigger and actually make that deal is something that is very particular to that situation. And I'm really glad that we can defer to a well-experienced board to help us out with that. Bob, maybe I'll put you in the hot seat for that one as well.
Well, I think, but my feeling is you're in a very good position. I mean, because in a way you have 3 horses that you're riding. So, so it gives you the opportunity to develop certain things yourself, or Epibone develop certain things itself. It also gives you the opportunity to do partnerships, and, both can create value. I, by the way, completely agree with what you said. The key is to keep moving things forward, to keep creating things more and more that closer and closer to the clinic, closer and closer to approval, and basically the value will speak for itself. And but you're in a great position. I mean, some companies are what I'll call one-trick ponies. They only have one thing. I mean, and this is a terrific situation where you're able to have a generalized sort of platform, and you have 3 things that you've been moving along. So you really can have your choice. And the important thing about that is, the most important thing when you negotiate, I think, with big companies is your ability and your willingness to walk. I mean, and I think that if you just take the first deal that comes along, I mean, I don't think that that's a very good idea. I mean, Moderna's had a fantastic CEO, Stéphane Bancel, but I mean, he certainly would, lots of people, would have probably given him crappy deals for, the Moderna vaccine, but, he held firm and, and changed the world, and I think that that's really, and it'll change it even more. So I think that it's really important to be willing to walk if somebody's not willing to treat you right.
Yeah.
Bob, you've created so much value on Wall Street, billions of dollars in market cap, hundreds of millions of dollars raised, 9 companies publicly traded. What is your philosophy and strategy around companies at Epibone's level raising capital? What's the best practices in your opinion for them in regards to capital raising, et cetera?
Well, I think it's exactly what Nina's been doing. I mean, I think you raise some capital at a certain valuation and you, with the goal of hitting a certain milestone, and you could decide what that milestone is, but it's something that would create value. You know, getting ready for good preclinical data, getting ready for clinical trials, get then your clinical data. So it's you raise it in steps. Each time you generally what's happened is companies would generally raise more money, so there's more dilution, but they raise it at higher and higher valuations, so all shareholders gain. And that's what's happened pretty much in all the companies we've started.
Callie, what I'd like to do now is, can we just open it up to a few audience questions?
Yes,
That's
yes.
okay.
Yeah, so Nina, a couple of the questions that have come in, and I'm just combining it into one basically, is what type of stem cells are being used? Are these embryonic stem cells or pluripotent stem cells, which get differentiating into bone cells? And how long does it take to grow a replacement bone?
Well, I'll just answer that one really quickly. We're using adult mesenchymal stem cells derived from either adipose tissue, which is fat tissue, or bone marrow. And it takes us 3 weeks to grow bone, 4 weeks to grow cartilage.
Okay, great. And we had a couple in the chat as well. How did you choose Cleveland Clinic for your first in-human clinical trial, or did they choose you?
Well, Dr. Brian Gassman, who's on the face transplant team, there was a National Geographic special about his work doing that. I forget how he met us, but about, right when we started the company, he sort of took us under his wing and, brought bagels to us in Brooklyn. He grew up not far away from where our lab is, and really kind of adopted us in some ways. And he's been a really big force behind our work with Cleveland Clinic. We're just very happy now to be approved there and starting to recruit this week. So please, if everyone send us good vibes as we wait for those first patients to enroll.
Okay, thank you. And how long before we see other parts of the body using bone to regenerate bone joints? And what do you see as practical examples between now and the next 5 years?
Oh, well, we're going into our first in human phase 1/2. Once we start getting human safety data under our belt, it's going to be a natural time point for us to consider how to apply that technology towards other parts in the body. So the next 5 years that's going to be a question that's front and center for us. Obviously, we're going to have to consider unmet market need, competitive landscape, and how much we think that we could really do better than what's currently out there. But the next 5 years, I think, are going to be a time where we progress our current pipeline through clinical trials and also cherry pick some really high value indication expansions.
Okay, thank you.
We've got 207 bones throughout our body and we can grow any one of them. So there's lots of applications for us. The FDA, getting an FDA approved trial for any one of those is a different story. So it's going to be a good time for us once we have human safety data to then think about expanding.
Would you expand into the dental market?
That's certainly in the universe of possibilities. Dental applications involve teeth as well as the underlying bone. So there's a huge unmet need in that anatomical space.
Okay. And the last question, have you done any market research among fascio, maxillary, plastic, and orthopedic surgeons?
Absolutely. And if anyone's interested in, going into our data room, happy to share some of those learnings. We have quite extensive documentation. We work with, as a third party, we work with S2N Advisors based out of Boston and Cambridge, and they've been wonderful partners to help us develop our market research at arm's length that we can use for our internal purposes as well as for our data room.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for for attending today's webinar. Epibone will have all of your information, and or you can reach out to me directly and I can put you in touch with them as well. And I want to thank everyone for joining. And Steve, Nina, Dr. Langer, any last words to the audience?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I just want to thank you both. I greatly appreciate your time, and you did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you.